Hey, so BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and hear me out. So you know how Metal Masters is seen to have one of the better endgame arcs of the series? Hell, you could argue it's tied with G-Revolution and GT for that. The main characters and some allies all get some closure to their character arcs. For the most part, almost no one is left out, and while there are a few missed and wasted opportunities, the cast is balanced and just used enough that you start to ignore certain things and issues. But there is one issue I want to address. See, remember when the video I said X has aspects that are handled better in Metal, and one or two people got a little mad about that? Was it because of their blind hatred for X with no nuance to the point where they were being upset about a part of the show that they didn't watch, being praised highly, or were they being defensive about Metal or pointing out, I would do that, it's not as bad as people make it out to be, but there's definitely room for improvements, at least how I would point it out. Well, behind the scenes details, I was torn about whether or not to release the Harem video or the Legendary Bladers video first, because while I was working on one, I thought the other one would have been much easier to handle because I originally planned for it to be short, and we all know how that turned out. But while I was working on that, I kept thinking, what's a way that you could have had a big moment in the final battle? But I was really tired that night, so I cut some corners. Basically, here's a more extended version of my point. By the final battle of X, the four members all played a pivotal role in the final, battle. Exu was able to beat Midion and then defeat Omega, albeit a fatigued one. Bird was able to make sure he didn't lose to Lance, and that worked because if he did lose, Omega defeating Tenka would have resulted in Persona losing in the finale, despite the fact that they've improved their teamwork, while Omega's team kind of lacked that. And Bird showed that by customizing the blade with his allies' parts, he was able to bridge the gap of power between him and Lance, someone who didn't try to fix his own overconfidence and paid dearly for it. Then there was Tenka, who, while she did lose to Omega, she was the one who came up with the plan to use Common X and Exu as different people to the masses, so Exu could participate. You could argue that she was able to fight Omega better than almost anyone else, but Exu would have, and show Exu what her mother was capable of, so Exu would know how to battle her properly. It's not like the fight wasn't being streamed while he was running away, and part of being on a team is knowing and trusting what battles to fight. And she didn't give in to her mother's temptations for a rematch. But what about Multi? Well, didn't she participate too? If she didn't dress up as Common X or have some really good inflection to sound like him. Seriously, no one ever talks about that, and it's a little scary how well she pulled it off for her age. And let's not forget she lent Bird her assist blade so that she was basically fighting alongside him in spirit. Not to mention she created Samurai Caliber for Tenka in the first place. Heck, if Omega didn't have Final Drive mode, Tenka would have probably won that fight. And that's where my criticism with Metal's endgame begins. Remember, Gingka and Masamune fought Faust together and won because of Ryuga's interference. Gingka and Ryuga worked together to destroy the Spiral Force. Masamune and Dio fought Faust together to try and get Toby back to his senses. Dashan fought Julian to get him to restore his pride in a fit way of a blader. Kyoya fought Damien. If I were a toxic Naruto fan, I joked that hard work beats talent, even though the arrangement system is power that they could have had, but amplified to the point where it could slightly mess with their personality if overdone, especially since they couldn't train with the power at the time. And Tsubasa defeated Jack, a fight which probably would have went down like that in the tournament had Tsubasa had shown up, or had Jack not had to fight Ryuga. So, what was Yu doing during all of this? Well, he got trapped inside one of the arrangement tubes and then used Last Judgment Inferno. Which I feel like people keep forgetting Inferno Blast or Last Judgment Inferno are the same move. Methinks the dub team forgot that at one point since season 2 they called LJI Inferno Blast at one point, which confused the living hell out of me growing up until I found that out. And like I said, in comparison to the previous arc of their shows, the Misleaders battle and the Starbreaker final battle, not only did Tenka and Multi have good showings against their opponents, their actions played a role in getting the team into the finals. Meanwhile, Tsubasa and Yu are rendered unable to fight in the tournament thanks to the Shine knocking them out, but while Tsubasa gets the opportunity for a proper battle in the finale, Yu doesn't. And before someone says he beat Argo, A, he did that with Tsubasa's help, and B, I actually have a different way this could have been handled better. So, on that aspect of X doing some things better than Metal video, I pointed out that Yu didn't have a final battle in Hades City compared to everyone else. And I had questioned why not just give him Ziggurat to fight. My process there at the time was that Yu was a genius prodigy who was mostly hindered in universe by the fact that he was narrow-minded as a child and didn't have that many backup plans towards the end of the first season. And while people need to stop using nerfed, there were times where the writers weren't capitalizing on Yu's strengths or using them more to justify his losses, since there were times his opponents had viable strategies against him, but he wasn't given the time or ability to test whether or not the rest of his arsenal would help him turn the tide. See the fact that he didn't use some of his other special moves in the Wild Fang and Excalibur battles, the team battles anyway. Plus, with Ziggurat, while Beyblade has addressed and played with type advantages, heck, Kenta actually had a solid plan in Fusion to wilt Gingka stamina to stall attacks, though you could argue that case for a few fights, and Ziggurat could have shown himself to be a serious threat as a blader, since he's got a powerful attack type to use stamina type, and it would have been interesting for the brains behind the operation versus the born prodigy on the hero side, since Ziggurat versus Zio was kinda anticlimactic. Then my brain went, well, why not just have Ziggurat team up with Faust when Faust decides to fight Masamune and Zio, and he jumps in to protect Faust as Jinga and Ryuga started weakening the core, forcing Masamune and Zio to work together to break through Ziggurat's offense, so they can save Faust and be his abuser together. So, the question is then, who am I going to have you fight? Well, that's easy. Argo, but under the arrangement system. Yeah, we're going to have fun with this one. See, if there's two things a hardcore Beyblade fan wonders about, it's in Metal, what would happen if certain characters went under the arrangement system, and for Burst, what would happen if certain characters took on the Requiem project. But that one's a debate for another time. And it's always been a little weird. The leaders of Excalibur, Starbreaker, the Garcias all get to be Hades Jinx extra generals, but Argo is the only one that isn't fought at Hades City. Don't get me wrong, I get with the X comparison he'd be the Yoko, but A, wouldn't it be interesting if you got a final fight instead of just being part of the group ensemble before they have to reach Hades City? And B, what if we gave him the arrangements? You guys might think I'm crazy, which to be fair, I am. But remember, the arrangement system can bring out anyone's power, but we've never seen it happen to a blader that was pretty skilled enough as it is, and that was just hindered by their own mentality to grow even further. The Garcias feel like the perfect candidates to want to do that, and it's kind of a shame they didn't go off that route. Like between Julian and Argo, it makes way more sense for Argo to do it too, since he's getting an increase in strength. But let's just use the opportunity to give Argo and Yu a proper rematch and fight. I can't be the only one who remembered that Yu was actually doing pretty well against the Garcias until Argo stepped in and organized them taking down Yu beforehand, so the gauntlet battle style would give them an inherent advantage. And Argo criticized all of Gang Galaxy for being privileged and never having any hardship, which is something that some fans also criticized the group for, which I call bullshit on either way, especially if you watch what they had to go through in Fusion. Don't be like me, guys. I'm way too mean on this channel. Be like Wildfang. He's much nicer and constructive. But this would give you the opportunity to probably face Argo in a 1v1 match, and there's some stakes and threat since Argo's under the arrangement, and we've seen how much of a power boost that can give to someone like Zio. So you would have to fight tooth and nail using every one of his skills. He can still target Argo's weaknesses because the performance tip is something Argo could defend better, and Yu special could be 50-50 depending on how it interacts with Yu specials. Plus, while people tend to downplay Masamune's wins, Yu's wins were either thanks to the tag battle scenario, or in Alexi's case, a battle that was less about pushing him to be better and more about him figuring out his opponent, which, while having an intellectual battle isn't necessarily a bad thing, I think that some of them are very underappreciated and deserve more respect. When your opponent has to cheat and they aren't that impressive as a blader, at least on the surface, this would give you a final victory that would make him go out on the season on a high note, especially since people kind of underestimated the fact that he was a substitute. And it's not like their abilities wouldn't have clashed against each other pretty well. We've seen Argo use the debris from the stadium as weapons, which would clash with Sonic Wave. If Keel Strangler clashed with Sonic Shield, there'd be an interesting sight to see if Argo could use the energy ring to bypass Yu's. There's also the question of how well Argo would do well against Sonic Buster, since while he can't maneuver through the sand like Demure or wipe it out like Sophie and Wales did, Ray Gill could probably use its speed and avatar to jump in and out of the sand. It is a skeletal fish based off the constellation that was the keel of the ship Argo, after all. Also, come on, who wouldn't want to see a clash between Keel Strangler and Inferno Blast? Actually, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe when the dub called Inferno Blast Last Judgment Inferno, it was either when he fought Masamune or when he fought Tsubasa and tried to alter the vibrations, resulting in him using a different color. He actually never used that strategy again, so I think this would be a fight that would allow him to actually use it. And let's see if that's able to help turn the tide and help him win if Argo comes at him, expecting to put enough force based on the vibration, only to fail since you predicted it and changed course. And if you like Argo, he gets a good fight to go out on, and if you hate Argo and like you, it makes you look great and gives Argo a satisfying downfall. Everyone wins! If you made it this far, type you deserved better. Because I think a fight like this would have helped him not feel neglected out of the cast, especially since he comes back in Metal Fury and still plays a decent supporting role. But in the comment section, I'll leave it to you. Do you agree with my choices? Are there other characters you would like to see undergo the arrangement system? Would you like me to do a bit of a more in-depth look on how you could have been better used in Metal Masters? Because I know I promised that video a while ago, and I'll see what I can do with it. Either way, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. We're getting close to 1,000 subs, and telling you to do that actually works. I'll see you all in the next one, and BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.